Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm Roy. Thanks a lot for being with us today. We are the podcast that brings you guests from a wide variety of disciplines to not only give us some different things to think about, but also if you're having issues, it'd be a professional or an expert in that arena that can help you solve your problems. And with that today, it's a very timely guest, Holly Jean Jackson. She's a success coach, a business consultant, and a speaker that helps entrepreneurs and business leaders love their life and business again. With over 12 years of technology and business experience, she helps business leaders get their groove back physically, mentally, and emotionally. She does this through a combined approach of both coaching and consulting, providing practical and actionable results. She also helps end fear and frustration with technology. Holly also teaches her clients to remember self-care is essential, not an option. And that community is critical to success. Holly, thanks for taking time out of your day and being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today.
Wow, we hit on so many things. I had almost stopped at each one of them and said, yeah, that is right. Going through the holiday season, especially for solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, it can be take a toll on physically, mentally, and emotionally. So, what can we do to help ourselves? I know, I'm terrible about overscheduling and trying to cram, 12 hours worth of work into 8, and it just doesn't work out for me. So what are some tips that we can do to kind of help put us back on an even keel going through the holidays?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to remember what's most important to you. I actually just wrote a blog, I think last month around this. And one of the
Uh,
things was, create your values system with your family or your loved ones around the holidays and
right.
keep it really simple. What are the traditions, old or new, because COVID is kind of putting us in a different predicament this year, that are
Hmm.
important to you. And I think also with this holiday season, people are less busy because they're not going to all the holiday parties. They're probably a
Right.
bit zoomed out and tired of video conferencing. So I always dial this back, even if it's not holidays, it's like everyday life. I work with my clients on building their life and business compass. And all of your decisions on whether you say yes to something or no to something are based on your compass, which is personal to you as an individual. And on the compass, you have your 5 life priorities, whether that's family with very specifics around that, whether it's self care and health and very specific tangibles around that. And then the other side, you've got your 3 quarterly business goals that you're aiming to nail and dial in that year. And then from there, you have your long term 5 or 10 year goal. And it's important to have this compass so that you say yes to things that are on it. And if they're not, there are things or opportunities that come up that are not on your compass, you should gracefully say no. Otherwise, you're not growing in the right direction. So it's the same during the holiday seasons or not. Just really dial in what is most important to you and say yes to those opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's important. There's so many people on both sides of that fence out there that there's some that say yes to everything, some that say no to everything. But I think you're right. It's good to look at what aligns with our goals and what can propel us closer to where we want to be. Those are the things that we not only do we want to say yes to, but we'll probably put our heart and soul into it just because that's something that we need and enjoy more than likely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that a lot of us make the mistake of allowing society or people around us to define success for us. And that's why outlining your compass and what makes you happy, the things you're passionate about, the values that matter most to you and your community, write those out. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're going to just kind of willy-nilly make decisions, and ultimately you're going to be saying yes to things that force you to say no to things that are aligned to getting you closer to how you define success.
Right. Or that we just, unfortunately, we take on so much that we can just have burnout, which is, that's terrible because I think that affects us, as you were saying in the lead in about the physical, mental, and emotional. I mean, it can just drag us down. And Like I said, I'm guilty of that. You get busy, get sucked in, and forget to get out and exercise, forget to step away and take a breath. So even once we write down our compass and we kind of have our direction, so what are some daily techniques? Because I'll do good with that for about 2 or 3 days and then, kind of start slipping off. So what are some things that kind of keep us from falling off that cliff and kind of keep us back and focused on our compass?
Yeah, so having your compass as your screensaver on your computer and your phone,
Right.
having it posted all around the place so that it's kind of anchored into your life and it's a constant reminder of how you're defining success is a great way to daily check in with that. Sharing your
Okay.
compass with people around you is also a great routine, not daily, but maybe monthly or quarterly, so they can hold
Right.
you accountable. Some other daily techniques that I use, Hal Elrod has a book called Miracle Morning. And I actually do a very similar practice to that before he wrote the book and then just dialed it in based on what he shared because it's very, very amazing. And it's using meditation to quiet your mind, focus on breathing, and then affirmation work to, fix beliefs that are limiting or, beliefs that are not true anymore in our life to make them more positive and serving us. Using visualization, for me, visualization is necessary every day. It allows me to visualize how I want my day to go, my week to go, my long term goal, like actually tapping into that long term vision every morning helps me stay motivated and wake up excited. Or if I don't wake up excited when I do that visualization practice in the morning, it gets me excited for the rest of the day. And these practices, if you do them daily and you reflect and journal on that and you're consistent, and it does take 30 days or so to make that a habit. I notice that the days that I miss that, I don't have productive days. I'm not as happy. I'm not showing up when I'm doing interviews like what we're doing right now. And it just really shows up. So create that habit over 30 days and play with what works for you. So for me, meditation and visualization are part of every morning for me and journaling. But for you, perhaps it's simply just doing some short breath work and exercise. It's very different for each person, but figure out a morning routine that gets you excited and keeps you on track and keeps you grounded. It's the reason it's so important is it gives us a scale of where we are. When we wake up in the morning, are we burnt out? You don't know if you don't stop and check in with yourself.
Right.
I think I just shared with you, I just went through the most horrific move of my life and probably the second or most stressful 8 weeks of my entire life. And if I hadn't learned lessons from the past around burnout, I would likely be sick with COVID or something, or super burnt out. And so, because I have these daily practices, I knew that I couldn't do 100% in my business during this season because of what was happening personally. And I really up leveled my self care even higher. I was like, okay, I need to do a sensory deprivation float every week. I need to meditate longer every morning. I need to be willing to ask for and receiving support. And I need to dial back my launch to January for my online class and not December. So, checking in with yourself, knowing your capacity, and being aware of that is really important.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The self awareness, like the situation, if you would have just continued to pile on, it would have led to, probably disaster, not only mentally, but physically as well. And that's what, getting stressed out, it can drag you down physically, which then, like you said, you makes you susceptible to, illness and sicknesses and a lot of other things going on. So, because that's been a positive, I think, that's come out of this COVID is that people have slowed down a little bit, and it seems like more people are trying to practice more gratitude, the journaling, and the mindfulness, because it's important to know really where you're at. Sometimes if you don't slow down, it's hard to pick up those signs that we need to around us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Even though I'm well practiced in these daily routines, I recently saw my physical therapist because I knew that my pain level was going to be high with the stress, even though I was managing it fairly well. And she asked me yesterday, she said, "Where does it hurt?" And I said, "I don't know, because I'm self aware enough to know that I have separated myself from my body because my stress level is so high and I'm in fight or flight, and I have been for weeks." So I knew that that was what was happening.
Yeah.
And I was getting all of the support tools and everything that I needed and asking for and receiving help, which is hard for me. But still, it's so easy to separate ourselves from what's happening in our body. And stress wreaks so much havoc in the system. I also knew I wasn't eating enough or drinking water enough. And so I told people around me that were here to help me during this transition, I said, make me drink water and make me eat food because I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it.
Yeah, and those are. I wish I could show you. I've got a sign that hangs over my desk that says that these are kind of the daily things: exercise, eat right, drink water, get your sleep. And another one I've added is breathe. And I was not aware of this, but I've been in some situations where people be like, it's okay to just to take a breath. And when I get stressed or get really involved in something, it doesn't have to be bad, it could be good, but when it's intense, I guess I tend to hold my breath. And so learning that was big for me, because now I need to step back, make sure taking those deep breaths and not the shallow breaths, because it's amazing how much that we can control in our body by just simple breathing.
It's really interesting you just said that. Every time people say breathe, I check in with like where my breathing is. And even though I'm not stressed out right now, like specifically over anything in this moment, what I notice is when I've been in fight or flight or just a really stressful season for a long time, my breath is really shallow. So it's like, my
Mm-hmm.
shoulders and above, and it's like super, super shallow
Yep.
and short. And like you said, kind of holding.
Yep.
Versus as soon as somebody says, "Oh, what's happening with your breath?" I'm like, "Oh, wait a second. I need to actually inhale throughout my whole body and my diaphragm. And I
Right.
can actually let that out." And I think
Right.
sighing also is really healthy. So it's funny, people around you will sigh and you're like, "Oh, what's wrong?" And I sigh a lot. And I don't think
Yep.
I even realize this. People are like, "Oh, what's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing. I'm just like letting all the stress out of my body." And
Right.
it's a great physical way to just release all of that.
No, you're right. And that's something I didn't realize I was doing, but that sighing, especially when you're working and can't get up, it's like sometimes just to let everything out is really good. And like my situation, it wasn't even a stressful thing at work. One of them was we went to one of these painting things where they have the lady that stands up there and she does the painting and kind of tells you how to do it. And so I was actually having some fun, and she walked by and said, "It's okay if you'll just take a breath." And I'm like, I didn't realize it, but I was kind of sitting there with my tongue hanging out, just concentrating so hard that just don't think about it. But it's very important, because I think it controls a lot, or it can help with a lot of other functions besides just our stress. But just getting all the oxygen and nutrients that we need to our body. So, I mean, that's huge. Now, on your meditation, do you use an app or some other kind of a prop for that timer, egg timer, or something like that?
Yeah, it depends on the day. I like to use the app Calm, and I have the paid version of Calm. I typically use their daily Calm, but sometimes if my mind is really active and I want to do longer, I'll use the timer where you can just have very quiet and it has a bell ring every 10 minutes or something.
Okay.
And then sometimes I do my own meditations without an application. And then they also have a lot of apps for affirmations if you're really interested. I use physical cards from Louise Hay for affirmation work because I find that having a physical anchor is a great reminder of something I want to work on. And then I
Okay.
have these Sequoia, like Indian cards that just, they're not tarot cards, but they're always right. I'll pull one of them and it's just really interesting. It's like, "Oh, you need to work on trusting your intuition." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's right on track." And it's just really, even if you don't believe in that, it's just a different perspective to give you creativity and openness to learn something new about yourself. So anything that works for you that's out of the box, out of your comfort zone is always great to try.
Yeah, and we talk about, practicing gratitude. A lot of things, a lot of days, I may have 10 things on my to-do list or want to do, but you get through 7 or 8 of them and you leave two. I can find myself in the evening beating myself up over, wow, those 2 things I didn't get done. I got to push them out and being really disappointed. But I think it's probably good for us to flip that switch and be celebrating the 8 things that we did get done instead of, I think as humans, sometimes we always tend to go to that negative and try to not celebrate even the small victories that we have every day.
Yeah, the brain actually scientifically has been proven to have a negativity bias. So it was there back in caveman times to keep us surviving. So we'd
Right,
always see
right,
these negative things, and they're there so that we always remember them, so we can survive. In
hmm,
modern times, that doesn't really serve its purpose anymore. And so, for in modern times, we need to remind ourselves that it's so important to acknowledge progress every day. So when you're going to bed and you're judging yourself for missing those 2 items, like you said, it's instead acknowledge that you made progress on 8 things that were on your list, and acknowledge that you had enough self awareness to stop so that you can get sleep for the night, so that you can tackle
right,
more the next day. It's just about taking small steps each day, not tackling a mountain every day, because it's not realistic.
right. Talking about taking a moment to be reflectful and just be mindfulness. I read a study not long ago, and this was basically geared toward children, but I think it applies to us in business as well, is that we have to be still in order to be creative. And I assume, it's probably the same for most everybody, but just like myself, I can be so busy in the daily stuff that I'm not creative, but I can go take a 15 or 20, 30-minute walk, and it's like my head clears, and problems, solutions to things that I've been thinking about, all of a sudden they just come very easy.
Yeah, I mean, so for each of us, it's different what that state of flow is. But when we get to a place where our mind is not overthinking, and they've defined this as flow for the creative space, there's a lot of books on this and science behind it. For one person, flow could be going on a bike ride, and they have a problem before their bike ride. They finish the ride and they're like, oh my gosh, I have all these great ideas. For another person, going swimming in the pool could help them. Another person sleeping overnight, they could solve their problem. So it really varies for each of us, but you're correct. If you're so focused on solving the problem or staying in the day-to-day task after task and you're feeling overwhelmed, a lot of times it can be helpful to walk away from it and do something entirely different. And I can't tell you how many times where I'll do this, or even I'll be in the shower and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, you can't solve it when you're obsessively thinking about the problem. You
Right.
kind of need to change the environment.
Yeah, and I kind of like to jokingly say I've got a 20 meg hard drive mind in a 12 gig world. So because the other thing that I found that really helps me to kind of make space is to write stuff down, whether it's a kernel of an idea or a to-do list. If I get it out of my head, I can quit thinking about it, and I'm able to move forward. And over the years I've used a lot, but do you have a process for your task, keeping up with your task?
It kind of varies. So I use Evernote for ideas that I have.
Mhm.
I also journal every morning, and I keep post-it notes in my meditation space. So if I have a really great idea that I want to take action on that week or that day, I'll put it on a post-it separate from the journal. Otherwise, it will be forgotten because the next day will happen. And then I actually keep a kind of an old school way of a list. I have these moleskin notebooks that I use to track my to do list. And I love, there's this, I forget who wrote this, the perfect day formula. I use kind of a version of that to plan out my next day. So I used to try to block schedule my time for a week. That just found like it was not really realistic, other than just like my online calendar. Obviously, you have to chunk that out. But beyond that, just the night before, I literally plan out, oh, okay, 8 to 10 o'clock, I'm going to do some writing. And then after that, I'm going to do this. And it's realistic and it has some flexibility in it because life happens. And the more I do that, the better I learn about myself and when I'm most productive, like the best time of day for me to do writing or creative work or strategic work, the best time of day to do administrative things or coaching calls. And so the more you practice that each day, you learn how to be more productive and how better to plan out and be realistic
Right.
so that at the end of the day, you feel great about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like the old saying, the tail wagging the dog. If we wake up in the morning without a solid plan, then the first email we get, first phone call we get, or first thing that comes into our mind, that's kind of where we tend to go, whether that is the path that we need to be on to get us to our end goal or not. So I think that's an awesome, glad you brought that up, because that's something we need to do is plan. And kind of getting back to the morning routine as well, I think that we need to, we really need to protect that time. And whether it's, if you're an early morning riser and you can get up at 6 o'clock and say, 6 to 7 or however much time you need, nothing else happens in this time except, my meditation and getting ready for the day. But so many times we get up and, like I said, it's whatever the first thing that hits us, and then we're off to the races, and we've lost total track on where we need to be.
Well, and realistically, life does happen, even though I've been doing this for years. I have seasons where I won't be doing my morning routine for a week or two, whether it's vacation or this crazy nightmarish move that I just experienced. And then I'm like, okay, I need to get back into that. And so I have, a coach that reminds me, well, have you been doing that? And I was pretty good
Right.
about it, but then the last few days, because of the chaos, it has not been as consistent. But I can tell the difference, and because I've been doing it so long, I know I need to get back to it, and I have people hold me accountable. So also give yourself some grace and realize that there will be seasons or times where you fall off track. It's just more
Yeah,
about being aware, being forgiving, and then getting back on track.
exactly. So, one thing that you mentioned too is that the fear and frustration with technology. What are some tips that you can give us? Because we've become people like myself. When I started out, it was a big chief tablet and a number two pencil. I mean, we've had to adapt, and there's something new coming at us every day. I mean, there's all these other marketing tools, sales tools, apps and programs. There's just, a flood of things. And sometimes people have a resistance to trying new stuff.
Yeah, well, I find that in life, regardless of technology or not, whatever we resist persists. And so, as business owners, it's necessary to use technology. You just kind of have to get to a place of accepting that. And if you're having trouble, that's something I work with clients on. But it's also about being very specific around what technologies that you're investing in, your time, your resources, because you could go after 10, but you probably don't need 10. So it's being really smart, researching the different products, working with somebody who understands the technologies and the goals of your business this quarter. And it's really just creating that step by step plan of, okay, well, right now I need to get an amazing CRM, which is your customer relationship management system, so that I'm tracking information about potential clients, existing clients, companies I'm working with, family, even, and keeping my relationships amazing. And because we can't remember everything, we have so many
Right.
people in our life, especially in this online world. And so it's just biting off small bits of technology at a time instead of boiling the sea. A lot of people that I work with, what I find them doing is they try to learn 3 to 5 technologies at once. And if you start looking into things like funnels are not using one tool. They're typically using multiple tools. So you've got,
Right.
click funnels to build the funnel, and then you've got an email marketing tool that you're using. You're pulling from your CRM to target market to the specific people for that funnel. There's so much that you could get into, and you don't want to be too overwhelmed all at once. So it's really bite-sized pieces. It's also realizing that technology is supposed to help you. It should actually be reducing your stress, right? So
Right.
Initially, it's overwhelming because it's new, it's uncomfortable. That's normal. As humans, we resist anything that's a change or uncomfortable. But after you get past that hump of the learning curve, it actually should make your life a lot easier. You'll find, oh, okay, yes, this takes 10 minutes a day, but oh my goodness, like my customer service experience and my customer relationships are so much better, or I'm closing sales so much better because I remember things. My customers are raving about me because I have such a high touch experience and connecting with them for their birthday, etc. So ultimately, you need to make sure that it's helping you actually get some tangible wins. And if not, then get rid of that technology.
Yeah, and it's funny you're reading my mind because when we started talking about that, CRM is what jumped into my head because I talk with so many sales professionals, and they they have an aversion to using it, in the moment as we're talking, jotting notes. When am I going to reach back out to you again? How am I going to? Am I going to call you, email? What have I promised you that I need to deliver? But one thing I'll say about that is that all technology, or all CRMs, let's be specific, all CRMs are not created equal. And it may take you a little bit more time on the front end, but if you have control over what you use, my advice is look at 4 or 5 different ones and find one that suits your needs. Because I'm telling you, there was a period that I think I went through 4 or 5 or 6 within a year because I never could kind of like hit the groove with one of them. But I finally found one that suits my needs. It suits my workflow. It was perfect. So, um, if you're in a position where you can control that, be sure and take time to do research, to do testing. A lot of these guys give you free 30 days that you can, do it. So get on there and really work hard at it and find one that you can mesh with.
Yeah. And I mean, also, when you say they're not all equal, some of them are a lot more complex. So
Yes.
I'm not going to name specific instances, but there are some that, like, the onboarding process is so complicated. And I worked in technology for 12 years. So for me to say it's complicated, that is really saying something.
Yeah.
So if you do that 30-day thing and it doesn't make sense, or the customer service support team isn't great, that's not the right CRM. I mean, that's actually the same thing with any technology.
Yeah.
If it's so difficult that you feel like you're getting an MBA to understand it, then it's not the right tool.
Exactly. All right, Holly. Well, I think for taking time out of your day to be with us, we certainly do appreciate it, and hopefully we can, stay on track, especially through these holidays, get to the new year. Do you have any tips for, like kind of kicking off the new year where we can get off to a fast start?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually, if you look at my website, I'm doing an event. I think it's January 19th or something.
Okay.
And it's called Visualize Your Year and How to Make It Happen. So, the biggest mistake people do with the new year is they make their resolutions, but they don't set tangible goals, and they don't set the action steps below those goals. They don't set timelines to make them a reality. So you might have this really big goal, and it's really exciting and you think you're going to do it. Well, 94% or higher of people do not hit their resolutions. That's
Oh,
really, really
wow.
high.
Yeah.
So, that workshop, we're going to talk about some of the tangible things you need to do for the short term to take action steps. Also, I interviewed this guy who's the bucket list guy, Trav Bell, on my podcast recently, and his episode's releasing pretty soon. And I thought it was really kind of cool because I hadn't revisited my bucket list for a long time. So it might be kind of fun in the new year, especially since 2020 was really difficult for many of us, to revisit or create your first bucket list. So these are things that you want to
Yeah.
accomplish before you die. And then start thinking about maybe 2 or 3 in the next year that you could actually tangibly achieve. Because if you're excited and passionate about life, it's going to bring you more creativity. Your business is going to thrive. You're going to be happier. And
Yeah.
let's be real, in the sales world, if your personal life is in upheaval, it's going to affect your sales conversations, it's going to affect your business. And so, as
Exactly.
business owners and solopreneurs and salespeople, you have to uplevel your self care. You have to make sure you're at 110%, because otherwise, personal experiences will reflect in your business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true about especially sales when you're out in front of people. You got to be on your game all the time. All right. Well, what is a tool that you use in your daily life, either professional, personal tool, or a process? I know we've talked about some, but what is one that you feel like you just couldn't do without on a daily basis?
I mean, for me, the one that I can't do without daily is visualization. And it's not really an app or anything that I'm using. I've read a lot about visualization. There's not like a specific book coming to mind, but essentially, you can YouTube to find a guided visualization. But my tip for each of you is just practice different types, experiment with it, and visualize how key events for the day you'd like, how you want them to go. If you're a parent, a difficult conversation you're having with your child, visualize how you want that to go. It's great to visualize difficult conversations or conflict before going into it, how you'd like the resolution to occur, because then you're more likely to go into that situation with new ideas and a different perspective versus defensiveness. Visualize how you want your next year to go as you put together your New Year's resolutions and all of the cool things leading up to that throughout the year, because you want to enjoy that journey and not just the end game, and just celebrate along the way.
All right. That sounds great. Well, Holly, again, thanks for taking time out of your day to be here. We certainly do appreciate it. This is going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. Thanks for listening. Of course, you can find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast. Finally, just yesterday, the TBOBP, the initials for that, just became available. So you can also go to tbobp.com for same podcast. We can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even on YouTube. And also on all the major platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. If we're not on one that you listen to, reach out. I'll be glad to get us added onto it. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other.